Obligations are mostly in form of government paper, and you have recurrent expenditures, something you've also mentioned. So these guys are not in a very good position as far as their work is concerned.
Yes.
And this all goes back to, so how do you manage your situation in terms of your current debt and projected debt? Because we are still getting in more debt. Now, the more debt we get, it simply means you're squeezing ourselves more.
Does it?
Because going by this particular script, what these guys are likely to do, they're likely to be like, just increase the taxes.
Does it?
And that may not work short term, simply because you increase your taxes, you squeeze the economy more. So, let me give you an example.
Yes.
You have your obligations with the government paper, which you have to settle. If you don't settle, it simply means your rating internationally as a country is at jeopardy. It's at jeopardy because consumers of government paper come twofold. Number one, your local banks and your local corporates. They'll quickly run to buy government paper because the thinking is safe bet.
It's a sure bet.
It's a sure
Yes.
bet.
Yes.
So let me buy government paper. And then you also have international fund managers who, based on whatever they see in terms of returns, they'll buy the paper. And then, of course, you have structured borrowings like the Eurobond, which you just alluded to. So the cabinet secretary for treasury is in a very, very tight spot. I think if you look at it long term, what may need to be done, which is going to be very, very difficult, government spending on recurrent expenditure, any unnecessary spending may need to be clipped.
Yes.
And then the debt management. You will hear economists talk of things like renegotiation of debts, so that in the event you had an obligation this year, it's probably restructured for you to pay a lesser installment.
Yes.
What I foresee happening, or what I can see happening, I mentioned before on a report which came out last night, that the government will be getting a facility from China to repay the Eurobond. We should be asking ourselves, what are the terms and conditions of that $1 billion facility which is coming in from China? Because if its terms are worse, we're simply digging ourselves a bigger hole. So the country is in a very precarious situation. As far as economics are concerned,
yes,
and as what I alluded to before in terms of the taxing juggling act, if you tax fairly, you will spark growth. If you tax extremely, you will experience what you're experiencing right now.
Yes.
A situation whereby we are sucking a lot of money from the economy, and long term, it may not be beneficial. What the government may need to do, you see, the government is sending a message and telling us, take the bullet now, we will recover later.
Yes.
I think the idea may be inverse.
Yes.
Take the bullet now as the government and then recover later. How do you do that? You do that by having reasonable taxes. And then we've been seeing His Excellency the President do a lot of rounds. We are seeing a lot of agreements coming in, international agreements coming in from the trip from India, from the trip from Europe. We have so many trips. And we're hearing that we have this agreement in place, this agreement in place, this agreement in place. You see, these agreements need to translate to practical things which you can see. If you're going to give guys concessions to open factories in the country, please do so. If you're going to, so we need to work in such a way that we have more players in the economy so that you collect more long term rather than collect more short term. Because we are aiming to collect more short term, that's why we're hurting. That's why you're hearing Jugunadungu say, okay, based on these obligations and based on this, you see, the focus is, this is what I'm collecting and these are my obligations. The idea would now be to have concerted efforts of looking at the obligations we have, the debt obligations. Of these debt obligations, how many of them can we do renegotiations and probably spread out our obligations in terms of installments in such a way that on this other side, we can have a tax regime which will spark growth.
That's it. But just before I cross over to Maura this morning, because there's a concerning headline as well this morning that is touching on